The box was buried behind that stone wall, unknown to anyone until Julia fainted in the middle of the bar and her face was no longer human. I worked there. I knew that room had once been the home of someone who had vanished without a trace. And that night, as I placed my hand on the cold wall, I heard a whisper. A woman waiting for someone to break the final seal. Join me as I explore a true story hidden beneath the concrete of modern Singapore, where the memories of the dead have never rested. You took everything. That wall, it's all I had left. The voice wasn't hers. It was deeper, older, and furious. The room went cold, lights flickered, then silence. Just 2 days before, Ethan Lem thought his life was normal. An ordinary guy in his late 20s, working remote from the upstairs room of an aging shophouse he'd inherited from his grandfather. A place tucked deep in a quiet Chinese neighborhood where the air always seemed a little heavier, like it remembered things people forgot. Since he was a boy, Ethan had been warned, never touch the stone wall behind the kitchen. It looked out of place, thick granite blocks framed into a modern plaster room, like something left behind on purpose. But no one ever explained why. He never thought much of it until a plumber, fixing a routine leak, accidentally drilled too far into that wall. That night, mirrors cracked. His cat refused to enter the kitchen, and Ethan woke up gasping from a dream where a snake as large as a man's arm coiled around his legs and stared into his soul with human eyes. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. As days passed, Ethan's body began to itch with strange rashes. His sleep grew restless, and always the same whisper in his dreams. You've broken the seal. He chalked it up to stress, until the day his girlfriend saw something in the corner of the room no one else could. A woman in red, no face, no feet, just silk and silence. Ethan had opened something that wasn't meant to be touched, and someone or something was ready to collect. It always started the same way. A hallway that didn't belong to his house. Too long, too narrow, walls pressing inward like wet cardboard. Dim red light at the end, flickering like a heartbeat, and silence so loud it rang in his ears. Then came the sound, a slow scrape like something heavy dragging across tile. Ethan would turn around, but the hallway would stretch behind him impossibly long. Then he'd look down and see it. A snake, thick as a forearm, dark as coal, slithering silently around his ankles. It wouldn't strike, it would just look up at him. Its eyes were wrong, too human, too familiar, like someone watching him from behind a mask. He'd always wake up the moment it opened its mouth. No hiss, just the whisper. You've broken the seal. The first time, he laughed it off. Stress, he muttered. The second time, he Googled it. Snake dream meaning brought up all kinds of nonsense. By the fifth time, he stopped sleeping entirely. And then came the marks. Red welts bloomed across his calves and lower back, itching like poison ivy. Dermatologists said it was non-specific dermatitis, probably allergies. Could be detergent or stress or nothing. His mother looked at them once and paled. She didn't speak for a full minute. Then, softly, "Don't sleep on the floor and never leave your feet uncovered." That night, Ethan burned incense for the first time in years. Still, the dreams didn't stop. He tried switching rooms, sleeping at a friend's place, even crashing in his car for 2 nights. But no matter where he closed his eyes, he ended up in that hallway. And the snake got closer each time. During a team meeting on Zoom, he zoned out, staring at the edge of the screen, and thought he saw a glint, like a scale catching light, just beneath his desk. His heart nearly stopped. That night, as he entered the kitchen to grab a bottle of water, his cat bolted in the opposite direction, tail puffed, back arched, hissing at the wall behind the sink. It was the same spot the plumber had drilled. That same night, while brushing his teeth, Ethan noticed something strange in the foggy bathroom mirror. Faint smudges on the glass, almost like handprints. But they were too low, and there were too many fingers. He began writing things down, keeping notes, patterns, dream log, rash severity, smells, sounds. Most consistent detail? A faint scent like old incense and ash, strongest around 3 a.m. He tried cleansing the place with sage, salt, even holy water his cousin brought back from a pilgrimage. Nothing worked. The dreams returned, darker each time. The hallway looked older now, cracked, moldy. He could hear dripping water. And in one dream, he heard voices, chanting softly in a language he didn't know. It was no longer just a dream. It felt like a memory. And then came the worst night. He woke up, gasping, clawing at his chest, convinced something had coiled around his rib cage in his sleep. He flipped the lights on, pulled his shirt up. 3 long, curved red lines had appeared across his stomach, like burn marks, perfectly arched, like a wraparound grip. No explanation, no injury, just there. He sat in the dark until morning, unable to move, unable to think. That's when he decided it wasn't a dream anymore. It was a warning. Ethan didn't believe in mediums. But at this point, science wasn't helping. Dermatologists shrugged. Sleep therapists offered breathing techniques. And his friends had stopped replying to 3 a.m. texts about dreams and strange burn marks. That's when Julia, an old friend from secondary school, sent him a location pin, followed by a single text. She won't advertise, but she knows things. The next day, he stood outside a tiny stall wedged between a noodle shop and a pawn store in the old quarter. No signage, just red strings hanging from the awning, and a smell. Not incense, but something older, almost metallic. Inside, the air was stale. The room dimly lit by a bare bulb swaying from a ceiling fan that didn't turn. The woman behind the desk didn't look up. She simply said, "Something's been following you." Ethan froze. He hadn't spoken a word yet. She motioned for him to sit, then pulled out a dish of rice, a stick of incense, and a brass bell. The incense lit smoothly, then, snap, cracked clean in half before the flame reached halfway. The rice moved. Not shook, not trembled, shifted like something crawling beneath it. She didn't blink. "You've broken a seal," she said, "one that wasn't supposed to open." Ethan tried to ask how she knew, but the woman raised a finger. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "There's a name buried in your house." When he got home, he opened every drawer, every cabinet. Nothing. Then he remembered the journal. It had always been there, a leather-bound notebook his grandfather used to scribble in, tucked on the top shelf of the storage room. Yellowing pages, hand-drawn maps of the neighborhood, notes in a messy mix of English and Chinese. He flipped through, scanning for anything unusual. One entry near the back stopped him cold. Forced to move the graves, authorities said no choice. But one, they left it, said the land was too hard. We built around it, used stone to hold it in. There was a sketch, a crude rectangle labeled rear kitchen wall. Ethan's breath caught. His grandfather had known. Another entry, dated a year later. Dreams came back. The woman in red. I see her near the wall. Sometimes I hear my name in the pipes. There were more notes, a family tree, several names scratched out. Next to each name, a date, matching the year each person in the family had died, most of them young. A pattern, but no answers. Ethan flipped to the back cover and found one final line written in shaky pen. If you read this, do not remove the stone. That night, Ethan sat in front of the kitchen wall, just staring. He ran his fingers over the cool surface. The drill hole from last week was still there, small but deep. He leaned in, pressing his ear against the stone. Silence. Then, faintly, so soft he thought he imagined it, a knock. 3 times. From the other side. He staggered back, heart slamming. Something was inside the wall. And now it knew he knew. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The knock from behind the wall replayed in his head on a loop. He stayed on the couch with the lights on, clutching the journal like a lifeline, rereading every line his grandfather had ever written, looking for a thread, a hint, a way to undo whatever had been set in motion. By sunrise, he had a theory, and it was terrifying.
Decades ago, Singapore had undergone rapid urban redevelopment. Graves were exhumed. Cemeteries turned into highways, malls, housing blocks. It was in the news. There were protests. But people moved on. Progress was progress. Except his family hadn't. The journal spoke of a specific ancestor, a firekeeper, someone entrusted with maintaining the family altar and ancestral energy. A woman, powerful, respected, feared. Her burial had been complicated. Stone coffins, layers of limestone, protective charms. Ethan remembered stories about a distant relative who refused to let her tomb be moved. There were arguments, lawsuits. In the end, the authorities pushed through. But the journal said something else. When the machines came, they hit stone and stopped. Said it was too deep. They left it, buried it again, and paved over. The family had been forced to adapt. The old tomb left beneath the new foundation. His great-grandfather, unable to defy the government, had built the kitchen around it. The wall was not just a wall. It was a boundary marker, a silent warning, a forgotten grave. Ethan flipped to a folded note taped to the back cover. It was brittle and stained. It read, "Names carry power. If the name is lost, so is the soul." One was sealed in silence. Her name was Mei Lian. She is the 5th root. 5th root. He scanned the family tree. Every generation had a central female figure, one in each, respected, unmarried, always tied to the family altar. Mei Lian had no death date next to her name, only a symbol, a square, like a stone. As he read deeper, the entries grew darker. Daisy died after seeing someone in her mirror. No one else saw it. Benjamin swore he heard crying behind the stove. I sometimes wake with ash on my pillow. And then, I dreamed of the corridor again. This time I didn't walk. I was being dragged, and she followed me back. By now, Ethan could feel the weight of the wall pressing into his thoughts. He walked back into the kitchen, sat on the floor, and stared at it. He tried to imagine Mei Lian, Once a real person, now reduced to ash and stone, and a name almost no one remembered. And then he whispered it. Mei Lian. The temperature dropped. The overhead light buzzed. And for a moment, Ethan swore he heard breathing, not his own, behind the wall. He didn't know what he'd just awakened. But it wasn't just about dreams anymore. Someone in his bloodline had been erased, and she was done being silent. It began with footsteps. Not loud, not rushed, just soft taps like someone walking barefoot across wooden floors. But always at 2:33 a.m., always in the hallway outside Ethan's room. At first, he thought it was his mother, but she'd been staying with relatives for the week, escaping the growing tension in the house and Ethan's obsession with the wall. He started recording audio every night. For 3 nights, nothing. Then, on the 4th, the sound came through, clear. 3 steps, a pause, then a long, drawn-out sigh. He didn't sleep after that. Julia, his girlfriend, had been keeping her distance, not out of fear, but concern. Ethan looked pale, thin, twitchy. She offered to help clean up the back room, the storage area connected to the kitchen, where the air always smelled off. Ethan didn't want her involved, but she insisted. "If it's a mold problem, I'll bring a mask," she joked. They began sorting boxes, wiping down surfaces. That's when Julia froze. Her hand hovered over a dusty photo frame. Eyes walked on the far corner of the room. Ethan turned to look. There was nothing there. But Julia was pale, unmoving, her lips slightly parted. She whispered, "She's watching." Ethan followed her gaze. Still nothing. Then the smell hit him. Not mold, not dust. Jasmine, burnt sandalwood, and faint smoke. When he touched Julia's arm, she flinched and looked at him like she didn't recognize his face. She left the room shaking. That night, Ethan reviewed the footage from the motion camera he'd set up in the hallway. There was a moment, just 3 seconds, where the hallway dimmed unnaturally. The lights didn't flicker, they just dulled, like something had stepped between the bulb and the lens. Then a frame, barely noticeable, of red fabric, flowing like robes. He paused the footage, zoomed in. The figure had no face, just the suggestion of where one should be. Long black hair, a slit down the robe exposing pale feet, but they didn't touch the ground. The next night, Julia came over again, despite Ethan's protest. "I need to see it again," she said. He didn't understand why, but something in her voice, hollow, resolute, made him step aside. At 2:33 a.m., Julia stood in the hallway, silent. Ethan waited in the kitchen, watching through a gap in the doorway. And then she moved. Not Julia, something inside her. Her back straightened unnaturally. Her hands hung limp. Her head tilted slightly, like listening to something far away. She turned slowly to face the kitchen. And in a voice that was hers, but deeper, older, distant, she said, "You took everything. That wall, it's all I had left." The lights went out. The air turned electric, and Ethan felt a pressure in his chest, like grief that wasn't his. Then silence. When he rushed to Julia, she collapsed. Her skin was ice cold. She remembered nothing, but she cried the rest of the night without knowing why. The woman in red wasn't a ghost. She wasn't trying to haunt. She was trying to speak. And Ethan was the first one in generations who'd actually listened. It had rained for 3 days straight. The ceiling dripped,
The back room smelled like wet stone and mildew. Ethan placed bowls under the leaks, but one drip refused to stop, just above the part of the wall where the drill had pierced days ago. The stone looked darker now, as if the rain had awakened something within. Ethan pressed his palm to the wall, cold, not just surface cold, deep cold, like metal left in a freezer. And then the tile beneath it cracked. Not from water, from pressure inside. That night he returned with a hammer and chisel. He didn't tell Julia. She hadn't been the same since the voice. Ethan chipped slowly, methodically. The wall was older than he realized. Layers beneath the visible stone were thicker, denser. It wasn't just a wall, it was a tomb marker. 3 hours in, his chisel hit something that rang back. Not stone, metal. His breath caught. He scraped carefully. Revealed beneath years of mortar was a small rusted iron box, wrapped tightly in what used to be yellow cloth, now brown and brittle. The symbol on the cloth was smeared, but Ethan could make out a fragment, part of a character for root or lineage. He didn't open it immediately. He sat, staring at it for a full hour. The air in the room was different now, not threatening, just expectant, like someone was watching, waiting. When he finally pried it open, dust bloomed in the air, bitter, gritty. Inside were 3 objects. 1, a silk pouch filled with what appeared to be ashes, wrapped tightly and sealed with wax. 2, a small jade ring, hairline cracked but intact. 3, a folded piece of parchment, water damaged, the ink blurred beyond recognition, except for one intact word: Mei Lian. Ethan couldn't move. He understood now. This wasn't a haunting. This was containment. The box was never meant to be removed. It was a spiritual lock, ashes and identity fused together, held behind stone, sealed in silence. But the seal had already been broken, and whatever had been kept quiet for decades, grief, rage, abandonment, was awake now. That night, Ethan couldn't breathe. At 3:17 a.m., he woke gasping, clutching his chest. The air was thick, heavy. He stumbled to the bathroom and found Julia standing in the hallway. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't awake. She turned toward him and whispered, "She's still inside the walls." Ethan rushed to her. She blinked as if surfacing from underwater. "Did I say something?" she asked, voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just held the box tighter. Later that morning, he set the box on the kitchen table and stared at it for hours. He couldn't just bury it. He couldn't burn it. It wasn't about the ashes. It was about the name, the memory. Mei Lian had been erased, not by time, but by force. Her bones left beneath a modern home, her name hidden behind walls, her voice silenced. Ethan whispered her name once more. The lights dimmed, the walls creaked, and somewhere, faintly, he heard a woman sigh. Not with anger, but with relief. Ethan had hoped it was over, that naming Mei Lian had settled something, that the box could simply be left alone, that the whispers would fade. But grief doesn't vanish overnight, and the dead don't forget just because the living do. 3 days after opening the box, Julia invited Ethan to dinner with a small group of friends, something to pull him out of the gloom, she said. He agreed reluctantly. The cafe was quiet, air-conditioned, normal, almost too normal. For a moment, Ethan thought, maybe it really is over. They sat, laughed,
ordered drinks. That's when Julia froze. Mid-sentence, fork in hand. Her eyes lost focus. She looked past Ethan, past everyone, like something behind them had caught her attention. But when they turned to look, there was nothing there. Then she stood up. Her arms hung loosely at her sides. Her neck tilted, just slightly, like someone adjusting a marionette. And in a voice no one recognized, she spoke. "You took everything." The room went silent. "That wall, it's all I had left." The voice wasn't angry. It was desperate, guttural, dry, like someone trying to speak after decades in the dark. One glass on the table shattered. The lights flickered. The cafe's playlist glitched, distorted static. Julia's body swayed slightly, as if held up by strings. One of the friends stood to grab her, but before they could move, she collapsed to the floor. Chaos erupted. Someone screamed. A waiter dropped a tray. Ethan rushed to her side, heart pounding. Julia was breathing, but barely. Eyes rolled back, hands clenched, skin ice cold. An ambulance was called, but by the time medics arrived, she'd woken up, disoriented, shivering, asking why she was on the ground. She didn't remember speaking, didn't remember standing up, didn't remember the voice. But when Ethan whispered, "Do you know the name Mei Lian?" her eyes welled up with tears, and she whispered back, "I see her in my dreams." That night, Ethan sat alone in the back room, the box on his lap, his phone in his hand. He re-watched the cafe CCTV footage that had been sent by a friend, frame by frame. Julia's mouth moved, but not like normal speech, slow, measured, as if pronouncing syllables in a dialect not spoken anymore. In one frame, her hand lifted, and for a single second, her shadow on the wall looked like two people overlapping. Ethan didn't sleep. He began searching for answers beyond folklore, academic articles, anthropology records, interviews with spiritual mediums. One quote stuck with him. "When the soul cannot pass, it clings to blood. When the name is erased, it searches for a body to speak through." Julia wasn't possessed. She was being used. A conduit.
Mei Lian didn't want harm. She wanted justice, recognition, to be remembered as more than just a problem left behind. Ethan stood at the wall that night, placed his palm against the cold stone, and said, "You can use me." Nothing happened. But as he turned to leave, the box on the table creaked, and the air behind him breathed. There are some things that words can't fix. Ethan had spoken the name, opened the box, witnessed the voice, but nothing stopped. The dreams were worse, the hallway longer. The snake now had a face, Mei Lian's. Her eyes wept blood. His sleep became fragmented, his mind frayed, and Julia stopped coming by. Not because she didn't care, but because the thing in the house had latched on. Ethan returned to the medium, the one Julia had found weeks ago. This time she looked at him differently, not surprised, not curious, just tired. "You didn't listen," she said. "You honored her memory, but not her pain." He pleaded for help. She sighed, then motioned for him to follow. They entered a narrow back room behind the stall, lit only by oil lamps and thick with sandalwood smoke. She laid out a ritual, not an exorcism, but a farewell rite. "The box must be closed," she said, "but not hidden. She doesn't want silence anymore. She wants closure." They chose dawn.
because it was when light and shadow shared the sky. The setup was simple, but precise. 3 candles in a triangle, a bowl of uncooked rice, the ashes rewrapped in new silk, Ethan kneeling barefoot before the wall, holding the jade ring. The medium began to chant, low and rhythmic, a language Ethan didn't know but somehow understood. And the house changed. The floorboards groaned, the walls expanded as if breathing. A wind rose inside the room, though no windows were open. The candle flames leaned outward, away from the box. Then, a knock from inside the wall. Ethan flinched, but the medium didn't stop. He stared into the flame before him, and in its flicker, he saw her. Not a ghost, a woman, hair-pinned, eyes red, dressed in ceremonial red robes, standing behind the wall as if it were glass. Mei Lian. She didn't speak. She just looked tired. Not angry, not vengeful, just waiting. Ethan reached for the box. Whispers flooded the room, dozens of voices, some weeping, some chanting. The temperature plummeted, the flame turned blue. The medium began to shake. "You must say it," she hissed. "Say her name and tell her what she is." Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came. Then, from somewhere within him, it surged up. "Mei Lian, you are remembered. You are family. You were never supposed to be forgotten." The candle flames roared high, then extinguished all at once. Darkness, silence, and the soft, unmistakable sound of a woman crying, then breathing, then gone. When the lights returned, the room was calm, still. The air smelled like wet jasmine and earth. The medium knelt beside him and touched the jade ring. "She's not trapped anymore," she said, "but the house will always carry her echo." Ethan closed the box, rewrapping it slowly, not to hide, but to protect. Mei Lian's name would no longer be sealed. It would be passed down, spoken, honored. The next morning, the air felt lighter. Not normal, not yet, but like a window had finally opened in a room that had been sealed for too long. Ethan stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the wall. The surface no longer looked like cold stone. It looked like memory, unmoving but not hostile. The box sat on the table. He had wrapped it with care, using fresh yellow silk and a string of red twine. He didn't know what protocol to follow. There were no rules for burying what had already been buried once and forgotten. So he chose a simple path. He carried the box to a small, quiet temple tucked away near the city's edge, a place his grandfather used to visit on the first day of Ghost Month. The monks didn't ask questions. When Ethan told them it was for someone who had been left behind, they simply nodded. The monk led him to a columbarium wall where old remains rested, names etched in fading characters. There was no plaque for Mei Lian, but there was space. Ethan knelt and placed the box inside the empty recess, lining it with rice and a sprig of jasmine. He lit a single stick of incense, then bowed 3 times, low and slow, and whispered, "You were never meant to disappear." The wind stirred. The jasmine moved, and somewhere in the temple a bell rang. No one had touched it. He stayed there for a while, not praying, not thinking, just breathing. It was the first time in weeks that the silence didn't feel threatening. The air was still, not haunted, just at peace. That night he returned home. The kitchen felt different. The wall still there, but no longer oppressive.
He placed his hand on the stone and whispered, "Thank you." No sound replied, but something warm passed through his palm, like the last bit of heat from a candle just snuffed out. Julia texted him later. "Had a dream. She said, 'Thank you.' I think I can sleep now." So could he. Mei Lian's story was no longer trapped behind stone. It was remembered, it was spoken, and it was finally free. A year later, the house looks different. Not renovated, not flipped, just transformed. The back room is now open, flooded with light. The old kitchen wall is untouched, still fixed stone, still cool to the touch, but now framed by soft lighting and a minimalist wooden shelf with a single item on it. A framed calligraphy piece. 2 words, simple and deliberate. Remember her. Ethan didn't sell the house. He turned it into something else. The Fifth Wall Cafe. Quiet, earth-toned, no Wi-Fi, no music, just silence, books, and jasmine tea. People come in not knowing why they're drawn to it. They sit, they linger, they say it feels safe. Some say the air near the back room is cooler. Others say the smell of burnt sandalwood occasionally floats through, though there's no incense burned on site. One elderly customer once stared at the wall for a long time before saying, "Whoever's here, they're not sad anymore." Ethan never tells the full story. He doesn't need to. But he wrote it once, anonymously, on a local urban legends forum. A tale about a sealed wall, a forgotten ancestor, and a voice that refused to vanish. The story spread. Some called it fiction. Others swore they'd lived something similar. Every ghost month, small offerings appear outside the cafe. Folded paper boats, mandarin peels, even a single stick of incense. No one sees who leaves them, but Ethan always smiles when he finds them.
On the anniversary of the final ritual, Ethan opens the cafe an hour early, lights a single red candle, places it near the wall, sits in silence. No chant, no tears, just memory and peace. Not all walls are built to divide. Some are built to hold. Some are built to protect. And some, like this one, to remind. What's forgotten isn't always gone. In a place like Singapore, where order, regularity, and efficiency are the gold standard, people don't want to think about what's messy, unresolved, or uncontrollable. But that's why it lurks deeper, in walls, in sleep, in the memories of people who are no longer mentioned. Mei Lian, like thousands of other migrant workers, came with dreams of a better life. But she was forgotten, buried, and sealed away like a system error. She has no voice, no grave, no name. This story is more than a ghost story. It's a warning. What's hidden, if not released, will return. A civilized society can't be built on brick walls and high-speed Wi-Fi alone. It needs to be built on the right memory. There needs to be a place where souls like Mei Lian can be remembered, even if it's just a small frame in a coffee shop. If we don't remember them, who will? If you've ever felt like something was wrong with your room, if you've ever heard footsteps when no one was there, or if you've ever looked at a wall and felt like someone was looking back at you, then you need to re-watch The Fifth Wall. Don't forget, like if this story makes you shiver. Comment, what do you think Mei Lian wants? Is she freed, or is she just getting started? Subscribe so you don't miss the next video.